Welcome to the LeaderTreks Youth Ministry Trainingcast with Doug Franklin, where we help youth workers like yourself be intentional. Welcome to the LeaderTreks Youth Ministry Trainingcast. I'm Taryn.
And I'm Doug. I'm still Doug.
You've never changed?
Never changed.
Not once.
No.
No cases of mistaken identity, stolen identity.
No.
But we're glad to have you with us on the Trainingcast today. We'll give you a heads up. We're talking about a difficult topic today, but one that is really near and dear to our hearts. We think it's really important that we cover this topic for youth workers, and we're going to talk about compensation. We're going to talk about salaries in youth ministry and some of the issues that we are seeing across the board.
How to get paid.
Yeah.
We talk to youth pastors all the time, and it breaks your heart about hearing about how they're paid, how they're compensated. Talk to youth pastors whose families are on food stamps. Some of this is really heartbreaking. It makes me fairly angry at times about how churches treat youth pastors. If you're in a larger church, there's probably a compensation schedule, and you're maybe not facing some of this, but some of you in smaller churches, especially when there's just 2 or 3 people on staff, churches don't always treat youth workers really fair. And if you're a woman, it could be really unfair sometimes. So really unfair. So we want to talk about that and some strategies that you can use to get paid a fair amount. I know you're not asking for a Ferrari, and that's not what we're going to talk about, but we are going to talk about how to get paid a fair, a valuable amount for what you do, because I think that's really important. And I don't think many people talk about this in youth ministry, and I think it's really important.
We did recently come across an article by a gentleman, Dan Navarra, is working with, it's ypcomppros.com. And he was putting together, he does a survey every year of youth workers and their salaries. It's a national survey, and he put together some interesting statistics that are a little bit, or maybe a lot, disheartening. The first thing that we noticed in reading this article is the wage gap between men and women. On average, women are making about a 12% less than men in the same role. Doug, you want to speak on that a little bit?
That's a tough one, because you don't know how many family heads you have, women's family heads or men's family heads. Churches tend to have higher pay compensation for when there's a family involved. I'm not sure how that plays into it, but I do know this. If you are going to doing an interview, you need to do your research to know what is the compensation in that area. And this is what's really strange about youth ministry to me, and kind of my takeaway from this article is that there is not a professional standard for pay when it comes to youth pastors. It's very contextual. Some churches value all their ministers at a high level and everybody is paid at a really good rate. And then there's some churches that look at the youth pastor as, we got to have someone, so what's the lowest price we can get them for? This is the kind of church to avoid, by the way, because they're going to have that mentality in your budget. They're going to have that mentality when it comes to your medical expenses. They're going to have that mentality that runs through the whole thing. And so I think it's really important to look for the kind of environment where a church is saying, what is the most we can do for our pastors, not what is the least we can do for our pastors, because that's a really bad environment to work in. It's toxic. Or the other environment that I see a lot, which is pay our senior pastor a really fair and good amount, and all of our other pastors get next to nothing. And that kind of church, that's going to be divisive. That is actually going to be pretty painful. I wrote a book a number of years ago, The Disconnect Between Youth Pastors and Senior Pastors. And when we interviewed pastors, both senior and youth pastors in those environments, they understood how divisive that was. And so there was secrecy about pay and about all these other things. But those things always come out in a church. So it becomes very mean-spirited very quickly. So be really careful about churches that have those kind of pay gaps, because there's something there that talks about what their heart is about their staff. And really what you want to do is you want to be in it with the church members. You don't want to be just seen as an employee. You want to be seen as part of the mission and what they value. And so, do your research. Really do your research. One of the big things that if I could go back and talk to my young self as a youth worker, I would say learn more about how employment works. from how does the culture in a church work? How does the work environment work? Not just what time do they want me to be there and what time can I leave to go to the games with students, but much more about how the culture works and what's valued in the culture, because that's going to tell you a lot about the kind of work environment that you're going to be getting into.
Correct. It absolutely does, and we'll go back to another takeaway from this article, saying that there's not a strong correlation between more skill and more pay, which in the youth ministry world is a little bit frightening, because many youth workers are asked to fulfill multiple roles, multiple responsibilities, whether you're the youth worker and the worship pastor, or you're the youth worker and the IT director.
It happens the minute you're successful, Taryn. The minute you start doing something well and the youth ministry starts growing, most churches go, what's more responsibility we can give them? That's always your reward for doing a great job, which kills me, because I would love them to see that the job you're doing is really valuable and worthwhile. So if your job description changes, your compensation should change. Let me say that again. If they add something to your job description, or if they ask you to add something to your job description, your next question should be, how will my compensation change? Don't answer and say, I'd love to do that. How about my compensation? Don't say anything but, how does my compensation change with that? Because I think that we need to understand that if they give you more responsibility, more compensation should be part of that.
Definitely. Doug, I want to make sure that in this training cast, we get to give some practical advice to youth workers who are finding themselves in the situation where they don't have sufficient compensation. And what would be your advice to them of how to go about righting that wrong?
First thing I would do is I would do an amazing job as a youth worker. I would chase after students. I would partner with parents. I would be a good communicator with my church leadership. I would stay within my budget. If I said students are going to be done at 5, I would be done at 5. I would start on time. I would end on time. I would keep my word. I mean, do a great job. People who do a great job deserve a great pay. People who do mediocrity, they deserve mediocrity and pay. So first and foremost, think about, how do you add more value to your church? How can you serve at a deeper level? How can you be more of a resource? When the church says, you're a little bit younger, you must know how to work iPhones and you must know how to work projectors. Help out, jump in, serve, be a part of that. If that's something that you can bring to the team, bring more value to the team.
Absolutely.
That's the first one. You've always got to think that way. Second thing is you got to do this, and this is the hardest thing, you got to ask for more money. You just got to ask for more money. That's one of the things that you have to do. So if you get that yearly evaluation, or the budget committee comes to you and says, what are you going to need next year? Ask for money. One of the interesting things that I found in writing the book, The Disconnect, was when youth pastors told me about their financial situation, I would ask them, have you asked for more money, or have you told the church about your situation? All across the board, no. If you're in isolation on this, if you don't have an advocate on this, you're going to probably not get paid what you're worth. And so what you really need to do is to be able to say, in a real honest way, here are my expenses, here's what it costs to live in this area. You need to do your research. This is what other youth pastors are paid in our area, and you need to be able to bring that as your argument for why you should get paid more money. But you need to say these words, I need more money. I need to be paid more money. I get it. You're doing youth ministry because you love God and you love students and you're willing to sacrifice for it. The truth of the matter is you shouldn't sacrifice your family for it, though. You shouldn't actually be put in this position by churches, but the reality is that you have to ask. And when you do ask, I have found that, 7 out of 10 times people are like, oh, we didn't know. We'd be glad to help. I think this is really important if you're a youth worker, especially in your 20s, that you make a relationship with a person in the church that is an influencer on the business side of things. I know you're not thinking about this. I know you're thinking about the ministry side. But think about somebody who's on the budget committee, who's an elder, who is a deacon, somebody at the church who is involved in these business matters, and ask them to mentor you in finance. Ask them to be your your financial buddy so that they can begin to help you think through retirement and what you need to be saving every month and how to control expenses and all of those things. This will be a huge help to you. And then they become your advocate at church. It's not just you asking for more money. It's someone who really knows your situation and has bought into your ministry that begins to help you. I think it's so important to have this kind of relationship at church today, especially in your 20s. And I think it can make all the difference in your pay.
And I think I would just add to that, Doug, especially in your 20s, and truth be told, especially if you are a woman, with the statistics are pretty clear that women very, very, very rarely ask for an increase in pay. Yeah. It's very rarely how we're wired. It's not something that we want to do. Half of youth workers are women, and I think a lot of this wage gap is a result of the fact that we've never gone to ask. So I think that advice is particularly helpful for younger youth workers and for women in ministry.
I have a friend that works at a Fortune 500 company. He oversees a team of 32 people. And we were talking the other day, and he told me that he's got about 16 women on his team, and none of them have ever asked for a raise. Mm-hmm. And he also told me this, that their company has a policy not to give raises unless people ask. Now that's a secular company, yes. But I don't know that churches are all that much different. Mm-hmm. And I would really encourage you as a woman to get this financial support mm-hmm. from someone in the church, and then to have an advocate, and then to ask, because I think that's the way it really begins to happen. Most churches put their youth minister on the back burner sometimes when it comes to this. And so being able to ask, I think, is really important. There's a lot of good help out there. I think Group even has a pay survey, I think, that they do as well, too, that can be helpful to you. But this is something to really think about. Now, if you're at a church that's really financially got your back, thank the Lord, yes. And continue to do a great job. Mm-hmm. This is not about getting money that you don't deserve. This is about getting paid for what you do. Right. And I think that really praying about this before you go and talk to your church is really important. Praying for courage, praying for the right words, praying for open hearts. Mm-hmm. But this is a significant matter. And I put it into a little bit bigger context if I haven't put enough pressure on you already, but this is a little bigger context. We need to professionalize youth ministry. Mm-hmm. And professionalizing youth ministry is about getting paid what youth workers are worth. And I think that when you fight for the correct pay, for a fair pay, you're fighting for all youth workers that are going to come behind you as well, too. And I just think that that's really important, that we begin to have these conversations on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Folks, if this is something that we can encourage you in, or lend a hand, give us a call. We'd love to be on your team in this matter especially. But we'll see you next time on the LeaderTreks Youth Ministry Trainingcast.
See you soon.